This season's NBA MVP race has really had a little bit of everything, from elite individual play on phenomenal teams to record-setting stretches of play, from unrivaled scoring prowess to playmaking that looks straight out of a video game, from all-around two-way dominance to historic statistical profiles. Generally, the MVP is seemingly decided through who voters believe to have the best combination of team success, statistical dominance, and the best narrative. But instead of following that classic route, in this video I'll be taking a deep dive into each individual aspect of the game and breaking down what traits I believe hold the most value, answering the ultimate question: who is the 2022 NBA MVP? The fundamental objective in basketball is to outscore your opponent, meaning at the root of every game comes actually putting the ball in the basket. Today's pace and space era has yielded some of NBA history's most versatile and complete scorers, yet the differences in play style are still very evident. Although the game has become much more perimeter-oriented over the years, we've recently seen a resurgence in post dominance, and that added spacing has given slashers much easier angles to attack the basket. More than ever, the league is stacked with players who can create their own shot from all three levels, while pull-up jump shooting has developed into a major staple for most ball handlers. Of course, the most productive scorers are able to provide a great balance of both high volume and efficient output, but not all scoring styles impact the team in the same way. Think about a high-volume isolation scorer, someone who can create their own shot at will and consistently get to their spots for self-generated opportunities. Now, they might not be as efficient as a knockdown spot-up shooter, but they're probably still providing more value to their team's offense for a number of reasons. For one, their scoring isn't reliant on another player creating a shot for them, meaning that their shot quality isn't predicated on how good their teammates are at making plays, but rather how good they are at creating for themselves. And if that individual scoring is coming at an efficient rate, the defense is forced to make adjustments to slow it down, leading to much easier opportunities for the rest of the team. Here's a look at the self-created scoring of every NBA All-Star this season. The outlier in the bottom left who has both the worst volume and efficiency is Draymond Green, and to make the results look a bit prettier, we'll just go ahead and take him out. These two low-volume on-ball scorers are Rudy Gobert and Jarrett Allen. Their efficiency doesn't really mean much because they rarely ever look to create for themselves. All the way on the right, you'll see the league's most prolific creators. It should come to no one's surprise that Luka's volume is in a league of its own, while DeRozan has done it at a very efficient rate. Some more guys who have created a lot of their own opportunities while maintaining good efficiency are Joel Embiid and Donovan Mitchell, along with arguably the best on-ball scorer in basketball, Kevin Durant. All the way at the top, you'll find Nikola Jokic, who does create a decent amount of his own shots and has unrivaled efficiency. There is still great value in the ability to finish plays created by others though. Whether it's through outside shooting or at the rim, capitalizing on these opportunities not only helps elevate a team within the flow of the offense, but allows players to maintain and even raise their scoring next to other high-end playmakers. This is why the highest volume off-ball scorers are usually big men, getting a decent amount of shots when rolling to the rim or crashing the offensive glass, and some can even spot up for jumpers. However, there are a few perimeter players who are near this level as off-ball scorers. Of course, there's Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, but Jason Tatum also has a great off-ball scoring arsenal that allows Boston's offense to flourish with the ball in other players' hands. There are those who don't play off the ball much at all, as they're generally creating for themselves, but among those players there's one whose efficiency stands out: Trae Young. Although Atlanta's offense has him dominating the ball in a heliocentric style of play, he's still able to capitalize on the playmaking of others when needed. The thing is, off-ball scoring is almost always more efficient because it comes as a result of another creator bending the defense, which is why rim-running bigs tend to lead the league in efficiency. On the other side of that, the players who self-create a large majority of their shot attempts are able to do so at a much higher volume, but at the expense of shot quality and accuracy. meaning that those who can not only create for themselves at a high level, but also execute on chances created by teammates are in most cases the best overall scorers in the NBA. There are still other factors at play here, such as the spacing each player has to work with, which can heavily influence the production. So if we also take that into account, here's a look at the estimated scoring impact of each of these players on a per game scale. According to this metric, the league's most valuable scorer this season has been Nikola Jokic, followed closely by Kevin Durant, Joel Embiid, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and LeBron James. As I referenced earlier though, some of the value that comes from a player's scoring actually adds to their playmaking as well. Great on-ball scorers force defensive adjustments and as a result open up easier scoring opportunities for the teammates around them. Two metrics that attempt to estimate how much defensive attention a player draws and how many open shots that creates for teammates are Basketball Index's scoring gravity and Ben Taylor's box creation. As expected, those lower end primarily off-ball scorers aren't forcing many defensive adjustments or generating lots of open looks for others. Some of the league's premier scorers who draw lots of attention but aren't quite league best playmakers show up at this top portion of the graph, whereas the very best creators like Trae Young and Luka Doncic are further to the right. This is because they not only open up the offense through the threat of their scoring, but also take advantage of it at a higher level due to their passing ability. Actually capitalizing on these opportunities once they're produced can be just as important, whether it's the one who initiated the advantage maximizing their own play, or someone who's just so good at passing the ball that they're able to exploit weak spots in the defense without ever moving it. This perfectly describes a dynamic within Golden State's blistering offense over the past years, where Steph Curry's constant movement and threat as a shooter generated a boatload of advantages and downhill opportunities for teammates, while Draymond Green anticipated these openings and capitalized with elite passing. These plays are created by Steph's gravity, but the one facilitating still has to make the correct read, and both hold value. Measuring a player's passing ability through numbers can be a bit difficult. It's relatively impossible to capture the different deliveries, manipulation, and timing that go into it. But potential assists are a good indicator of how often a player is distributing to a shot attempt, while turnovers can help determine the success rate. Again, you have the extremely low and high volume passers, and that correlates pretty well with their turnovers. But there are a couple players who not only pass at a ridiculously high rate, but do it without turning the ball over, those being Chris Paul and DeJounte Murray. This brings up a pretty interesting talking point though. While of course not giving your opponent the ball should be a goal when looking to make a play, sometimes this can lead to players not taking risks and missing the highest value opportunities. Not all shots are the same. A layup is significantly more efficient than a mid-range shot, but also harder to get the ball to. And if we look at which players have the largest quantity of high-value assists, it makes more sense why some of these players are turning the ball over just a bit more. Similar to scoring though, playmaking can be influenced by team situation. So if we account for that, as well as creation and passing ability, here's a look at the estimated playmaking impact of each of these players per game. Kevin Durant is one who demands so much attention through his scoring that he doesn't need to be an extremely elite passer to generate great team offense. Whereas players like LaMelo Ball, Chris Paul, DeJounte Murray, and Darius Garland are generally exploiting defenses through their passing skills. Then you hit the group of players who pair high volume creation with phenomenal passing, like James Harden, Nikola Jokic, and Luka Doncic. Then an outlier among outliers, Trae Young. Going back to how tied one's playmaking is to their scoring though, I feel like a better indicator of how much offense these players are generating is pairing the two together. It's no surprise that the very best are Trae Young and Nikola Jokic, followed closely by LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Luka Doncic, while some other notable names on this list include Embiid, Giannis, and Steph Curry. Now, this doesn't necessarily tell us everything about each player's offensive game, as you still have to include things like floor spacing and play off the ball, but it's a good estimate on how well they lead or engine a team offense, which holds a majority of the value. Now, what's not even close to as easy to quantify is the defensive side of the ball. Statistics on that end of the floor are very limited and heavily influenced by the play of others, so it comes down to breaking down different traits or styles and determining how much value each holds. Even with how perimeter-oriented the game has become, protecting the rim will always be the primary focus of a defense because those are the easiest shots in basketball. Whether it's a layup or a dunk, shots in the paint are far and away the highest percentage you can take in the sport, so preventing those attempts is the first key to building a successful team defense. This is why more often than not, the Defensive Player of the Year award is given to the league's best paint protector. They hinder the offense's ability to score as efficiently as possible while contesting more shots than anyone. Here's a look at how many field goals each player defends and the percentage allowed on those attempts. You'll notice that Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, and Rudy Gobert contest significantly more shots than anyone else. This is due to not only how involved they are in the pick and roll, but how often they rotate to deter shots at the basket. This middle tier includes primarily versatile wings and forwards who cover lots of ground or are in switch-heavy schemes that allow them to defend multiple players. Whereas this last group is players who are hidden off the ball as much as possible due to their lack of capability. Actual paint defense isn't the only way to protect the rim though, as we consistently see with Utah in the playoffs, preventing dribble penetration in many cases can be just as important. This is where point of attack and overall man-to-man defense come into play. The ability to not only match up with great ball handlers and offensive players, but also switch from position to position adds a level of flexibility to a team's defense that makes scheming much more difficult for the opposition. For example, think of the Miami Heat. In many ways, their form of rim protection is Bam Adebayo's ability to switch out onto the offense's best slashers and take away their rim pressure, whether it's coming from a point guard or a power forward. Thanks to Basketball Index, we have some good estimates on not only how tough a player's defensive assignments are, but how versatile their man defense is. Anchor bigs generally don't move from the painted area unless absolutely necessary, so their matchup is generally just the worst shooter on the floor. Players that are commonly hidden or play in switch-heavy systems might not have the most difficult matchups, but see lots of different positions and roles. Some players that are not only expected to defend in multiple different spots, but also step up to the toughest offensive threats are Fred VanVleet, DeJounte Murray, Draymond Green, and Chris Middleton, while the two players who both switch at an extremely high rate and guard the very best offensive players are Andrew Wiggins and Jimmy Butler. Notice how generally the best and most versatile man defenders are athletic forwards or bigger guards. This is because they have the physical traits to limit size advantages while still being quick enough laterally to not get burned in space. Still though, there are other ways to slow down an offense without deterring shots at the rim or dominating a one-on-one matchup. Think about rangy off-ball defenders who consistently make the right rotation or directly disrupt the ball itself. While there aren't any numbers to actually quantify most off-ball attributes, the basic defensive box score can actually tell us quite a bit about these players. A combination of steals, deflections, and blocks make up this chart, and separating the two extremes will tell you a bit about who's most active in making these rotations or playing lanes, and who just isn't involved defensively much at all. Each of these defensive attributes come with their own impact, and because the numbers have a hard time accurately appointing that to just one player, it becomes much easier to estimate when looking at a player's overall value on the court. While many traditional MVP voters tend to look at team record as a good indicator of how much one individual elevates their team, I prefer an approach that just looks at minutes where that player is on the floor. On-court net rating tells us how good a team performs with any specific player on the floor, while the on-off shows how much that performance swings when they hit the bench. A few guys whose teams played extremely well with them on the floor, but also remained good with them off are Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and Rudy Gobert, whereas the players who not only elevated their team to that level of play while on the floor, but also influenced a ridiculous swing in performance are Giannis, Curry, Embiid, Durant, Tatum, Jokic, and interestingly enough, Darius Garland. A couple names whose teams actually played better in minutes with them off the floor are Ja Morant and Luka Doncic. And no, this does not mean they make their teams worse. The actual swing can be influenced by rotations, shooting luck, and opponent quality, and just provide us with a base for their impact. That's why we have metrics that not only adjust for these things, but include other factors like the box score and precise tracking data. Among two of my personal favorites, estimated and augmented plus minus, a few names clearly separate themselves from the rest of the group, and many would argue that this shows them to be more valuable. I think numbers like these are very useful in estimating the individual impact of one player, but never an end-all measure for formulating a ranking. So if I take everything I've gone over in this video into account, as well as the amount of games and minutes each guy played, and I were given a personal ballot by the NBA to list my top 5 candidates and pick a winner, it would look like this. In 5th place, I would have Jason Tatum. He started off the season relatively slow, but ultimately ended up putting it all together on both ends of the floor while leading Boston to some historic stretches of play. His 3-level on and off ball scoring plays a major role in that offense, while he's gotten so good at capitalizing on the aggressive coverages he sees from other teams that he's developed into a very strong playmaker. He's a near all-league level defender through his phenomenal combination of activity, awareness, and physical capability, and his two-way value made every single lineup he was a part of perform at the highest level possible. As weird as it may sound, in 4th place I have Steph Curry. I understand that for his standards he had a major down year, especially shooting the ball, but he still remained a relatively efficient volume scorer while creating advantages for his offense in ways that only he could. His court-bending gravity on offense allowed Golden State to slant hard defensively and still produce at an extremely high level. And he showed to be the system with how Golden State struggled virtually every time he left the floor. There are a number of guys I could see moving to this 4 position and everyone else moving down, most notably Luka Doncic, but these next 3 are relatively in a tier of their own above the rest and all have a very strong claim to be number 1. In 3rd place I have Giannis Antetokounmpo. His GOAT tier paint scoring yielded some ridiculous production, while he continues to improve his decision making and passing to become a borderline elite playmaker. His improvements as a screen and roll big supercharged Milwaukee's offense to a high level, while he remains one of the league's very best defensive players. One thing I would say stood out this season is that in the absence of Brook Lopez, he was forced to play a different role defensively that saw him involved in a lot more pick and roll as opposed to utilizing his all-time backline and helping skills, and took away some of his value on that side of the ball. Finishing second, I have Joel Embiid. His blend of 3-level shot making and game-breaking foul drawing gave him one of the highest scoring rates in league history, and with his vast improvements as a decision maker, passer, and off-ball player, he's turned himself into a legitimate offensive engine. Although his motor on defense can be a bit questionable at times during the regular season, he's still on a short list of the very best paint protectors in basketball and had arguably the best two-way season of anyone this year. But ultimately, earning the number 1 spot for me is Nikola Jokic. We've never seen someone truly check every single box offensively, but he's great at just about everything across the board. He's an elite scorer both on and off the ball, one of the best passers and playmakers in the league, a great screener, offensive rebounder, floor spacer, and is very active off the ball. To me, he was far and away the best offensive player in the NBA this season, and say what you want about his defense, but in the regular season, he's clearly adding value. Teams aren't looking to exploit every single advantage they have as relentlessly, which allows Jokic to defend well through his combination of quick hands, length, and smart positioning. If your list has Embiid or Giannis number 1, I wouldn't argue it because all 3 have a very strong case and it comes down to personal preference. But in my opinion, the 2022 NBA MVP is Nikola Jokic. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in the statistics used within this video, make sure to check out my website, and for more content, check out my podcast and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments who you think deserves this year's MVP. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.